Avatar: The Way of Water has been a huge success, with it already being one of the highest grossing films ever. Despite that, many people have missed some crucial hints and Easter eggs in it, such as the banshees being bioluminescent. This one takes place right at the start of the film. Two of the main protagonists, Jake and Neytiri, are heading on to their date night during a scene that shows creatures from the first film. As they're talking about how their life has been ever since the events of the first film, you finally get to see banshees flying in the night. And as it turns out, they start glowing. While people in the film would already be used to it and don't think that it's that big of a deal, it certainly was to viewers. Why though? Well, the first film never showed an entire aspect of the creatures, and now they have a much more natural connection to the world. By just adding that little detail, something that's shared by almost all life on the planet, they point out quite a few important things. Such as them not being predators, since now it's clear that all life on Earth glows unless it's a predator. Speaking of Pandora, why do humans keep referring to the planet's immune response? Turns out that the research that Grace did on the planet was super helpful for humans, or sky people. In the first film, she theorized that the entire planet could be one giant entity, connected to each other all the time. Not just that, but during the entire film, there are hints that the sky people did try to come back and take over the planet. The one thing keeps flopping their efforts. The life on Pandora keeps on attacking them and foiling their efforts to complete domination. This explains so much about the city they have on the planet as well. It's called Bridgehead, and they had to burn down a huge chunk of the planet before they could make it just for this very reason. Though, after getting over that obstacle, they start calling the Na'vi an insurgency. Why is that? Well, they already think that they own the planet, and all other beings on it that are opposing them are more like a rebellion. Kind of weird of them to think that after making just one city. But they did figure out how to get over the planet's immune system, which has clearly made them really overconfident. That and their technology is clearly miles ahead of what anyone else on the planet has. That's exactly why Jake is such a big deal for the Na'vi. He knows the ins and outs of how their tech works, and can strategically help them survive and get their hands on the same tech. But I can't talk about the Sky People without talking about the main villain. Specifically, why Spider saves Quaritch. Most people are pissed that Spider was so easily forgiven, even after indirectly killing Jake's son. But they missed out on the fact that the character never intended to help the Sky People or Quaritch. Instead, if you can pay closer attention to the scene with the two and the Banshees, you realize that he just wanted the Sky People to know how beautiful life was living in the Na'vi way. He's a pretty naive kid, but you can't blame him. That's all he is, and he's never been through any betrayal. But the character redeems himself when he realizes he's just being used and quickly changes sides again. He even helps them bring down the entire hunting vessel. On the other hand, it wouldn't be a Cameron film without a bunch of references, such as from Free Willy. The director is known for putting in a bunch of references, mostly from his own works, and the same applies to The Way of Water. The film's scenes with whales were pretty uncomfortable, but somehow still had everyone glued to their screens, but that's just the start. Turns out that this time, Cameron didn't reference his own work, but pulled a scene from Simon Winsor's Free Willy. As soon as Lo'ak formed his bond with Payakan, things start to seem pretty familiar, but I couldn't put my finger on it. That was until the whale itself jumped over the humans with a twirl. Seem familiar? It's the very same scene from Free Willy. Though in that film, it was much more family-friendly, and the whale eventually found its way back home. But this time, the whale straight up dumped itself onto the ship and crushed almost all the enemies. Though that's not all. It even references the Titanic. In a film by James Cameron, there has to be at least one reference to one of his previous films. It really wouldn't be a Cameron film without it. And this time, he pulled out one straight from the Titanic. They're actually scattered throughout the entire film, such as when Neytiri and Tuck are trying to escape from the sinking ship. The entire thing is screaming Titanic the entire time. But that's not where it ends. There are even parts where you can see the two climbing up vertically. Does that ring a bell? It's exactly what Jack and Rose did on the Titanic as well, right before the entire ship went down. Though, obviously, the Na'vi are much better climbers than the Titanic characters. Why wouldn't they be? They're cat-like creatures that traverse their world in the same way. Not just that, but Kate Winslet, the same person who played Rose in the Titanic, ended up breaking Tom Cruise's record for holding her breath underwater. She held her breath for a staggering 7 minutes and 15 seconds. That's not the only reference to Cameron's own films, though. He even references Terminator 2. There are actually a bunch of different parts of the film that refer to the film. The ship's landing and destroying all nearby life was a pretty big indication of a reference to the scene that shows Sarah Connor's near apocalypse. Not just that, but the way that Quaritch crushes his skull when he finds his old body is exactly how the T-Series robots did at the start of the film, too. The RDA stepping onto the planet with their exoskeleton suits and the planet being destroyed by humanity is a pretty big homage to Terminator 2 as well. Though that much was expected, Cameron has a deep history with sci-fi. And of course, he was going to bring in one of his best films somehow. While this time, there aren't robots trying to kill all humans, it's the humans doing the exact same thing. But one of the biggest things that viewers missed out on were hints for Avatar 3. While there wasn't any direct indication of the things that are going to happen in the next film, in fact, the film didn't even have a post-credits scene. But Spider saving Quaritch could mean he's going to try to get revenge again, already setting up for the next film's villain. From what we already know, he could join the Ash Na'vi. Though, things could take a different turn, as there was some warmth between them at the end. You could end up getting quite a twist. What twist? Well, Quaritch could eventually join Sully in the gang. Sully and his family are probably going to stick around with the Metkayina until the third film. But they're going to have to deal with the rest of the RDA, who isn't going to stop until it gets redemption. Those are some of the biggest Easter eggs and references you might have missed from Avatar: The Way of Water. See you in the next video.